This is Lesson 11. Adding sound and video to your movies is a real way to create a truly immersive interactive experience. Throughout the written lessons in this chapter, you'll learn how to add sound to your movies for a number of different purposes, for creating sound effects on controls, background music, and even creating narrative that can help people along inside of your movie. One thing that Flash provides us, which is really handy, is the Edit Envelope dialog box. That lets us take sounds that we've imported into our library and edit them just a bit. We're going to take a detailed look at that in this video lesson. So to get started, let's go ahead and open up the FL1101_video.fla lesson file. If we go over to the right side of our workspace and bring the library forward, we'll see that we have some supporting graphics as well as a single WAV file imported into this lesson file called backgroundmusic.wav. We're going to work with this in just a moment. Go ahead and bring your property inspector forward and go down to the timeline, locate the background music layer. You'll find that within the Sound Layers folder on the timeline, and click the first keyframe to select it. Before we can work with the Edit Envelope dialog box, our first step is to actually place a sound on the timeline. And to do this, we select a keyframe, and we go over to the Property Inspector and work with the Sound options shown here. So let's do exactly that. Over on the Property Inspector under Sound, go ahead and locate the first drop-down menu, which is labeled Name. Click on this drop-down menu and you'll see we have a single WAV file imported into our library, and let's go ahead and select that as our sound. Once we do that, all of these other options become available. For now, let's make sure we have the same settings. So your sync should read event. Your repeat should be set here with a single loop. Under effect, make sure this reads none. Now let's go ahead and play our movie as is and see exactly what happens. Go to Control, choose Test Movie, Test. So what you should hear is some background music play after a slight pause. Let's go ahead and close that preview. Now that slight pause could occur for a number of reasons. Sometimes if we have a very large sound, it may be the actual sound just loading before it's available to play, and that's going to be a reality sometimes. However, this sound isn't that long, so there should be a way that we should cut down on that lag. Chances are we may have some dead space in the beginning of that sound that was never trimmed out in whatever program it was created in. The nice thing is we have the Edit Envelope dialog box to help us out. To access this, let's make sure again we still have that frame selected and we see that our background music sound is assigned. Go ahead and click this small Edit Sound Envelope button, which is located to the right of the Effect drop-down menu. So this opens up our Edit Envelope dialog box. The envelope of a sound is represented by its volume levels. It's basically a fancy way of saying volume or level. However, in here, there's a number of other things we can do besides editing volume. Let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of this. What we may also want to do is you'll notice that at first glance, we're not really seeing anything in here. We should be seeing a waveform. And that's probably because we've got the zoom level set really large. So we're not seeing the remainder of the sound. What we're going to do is in the bottom right-hand corner, locate this zoom out button and click it a couple of times until we see the entire waveform, or at least most of it, showing within the window. So just as we suspected, if we look at the beginning here, we'll see that we have a pretty large gap of just dead air before any sound actually starts. And this is just part of the original file. However, we can take a few steps here to take some of that out so that we can hear some of our sound quicker. Now we're seeing two waveforms here because our sound is stereo, so we're actually seeing the left and right channels. And this is going to come in handy a little bit later because we'll actually be able to affect levels for the two channels independently. This is how we create things like panning effects between your left and right ear and so on. What we'll also see over here is this trim handle, which sits directly in the middle, right alongside a timeline ruler, which shows us the duration of the sound. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to trim the beginning of the sound so we don't have so much dead air. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this trim handle here, and we're going to pull it all the way here until right about where the sound seems to start and release it. And you'll see what that does is that grays out this area here, and we actually see this distinct line that shows us the beginning of where playback's going to start. So let's bring this a couple of notches closer. Now, if you're not exactly sure if you're actually cutting the sound off or close to it, you can go ahead and use this zoom in button and if necessary scroll so that we see a little bit closer view here of our sound. So right in the beginning, again, let's pull that closer until we're pretty sure that we've got a nice close fit just like that. And to preview it, let's go ahead and we'll see we have these stop and play buttons here. Let's go ahead and click play sound. And we'll see the sound plays right away without any hesitation. That's because we trimmed out all this dead air in the beginning. Let's go ahead and click the stop button. Now we want to do the exact same thing for the end of the sound too, because chances are we may want to loop this sound, so we don't want there to be a big gap at the end either, or dead air at the end. So let's go ahead and use this scroll bar and advance to the end of the sound, and you'll see we have the exact same situation here. Let's go ahead and grab the trim handle on the right, and let's pull that in a little bit. And again, you may have to work with this scroll bar, but there's not a lot of real estate in this dialog box here. Keep doing that until you get to the end of the sound, when we see the activity start to die down here. And let's trim it in there. Now, let's go ahead and let's use that zoom out button a couple of times till we can see the entire waveform within single view, just like this. Now, you may be asking, what exactly are these handles or lines at the top? These actually represent the level of your sound. We can use these handles to either lower the sound or raise it at different points, or just overall. If I grab this handle and I pull it down, what you'll see is I get this sort of line that represents the level of the sound going from left to right. Let's go ahead and level that out by grabbing the other handle and just playing with it until the level is straight throughout. We don't want the sound levels to fluctuate, at least at this point in time. Now over here we've got one channel, but we have a second channel down here. So what we're going to do is try and apply the same treatment, and let's move those handles down so the volume level will be about the same in both channels. We don't want it to be imbalanced too much. If we go ahead and we click that play button once more, we can hear our sound. And let's click stop. We don't need to listen to that whole thing. So what we've done here is we've used the edit envelope dialog box to perform some basic editing on our sound. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We know this is not an audio editing program, but some basic things that will improve the playback of the sound in our movie are available at our fingertips here, which is really nice. Let's go ahead and click OK to exit this. And let's go ahead and test our movie once more by choosing Control, Test Movie, Test. And we'll see our sound loads right away. So we actually took care of that problem by removing the dead air at the beginning and end of the sound. Let's go ahead and close our preview window. Last but not least, let's just take a look once again at that edit envelope dialog box. Let's leave that keyframe selected like it is here. Let's go over to the property inspector and reopen it by clicking the edit sound envelope button here. Now you'll notice you have a little dialog box in the upper left-hand corner that reads custom. What does that exactly mean? Well, this is an effect, or more specifically, it's a volume or pan effect that we can apply to our sound. And we have a few presets here. If we click, we'll see that we've got left channel, right channel, fade left to right, fade right to left, fade in, fade out, and so on. So all of these are just basic presets that affect how the sound is played back specific to levels and channels. So for instance, if we say fade left to right and we select that, you'll see what that does is in the left channel, it slowly brings the volume of the left channel down while simultaneously bringing the volume of the right channel up. That's what creates basically a panning or bouncing from left to right effect if you're listening in stereo headphones or speakers. We have a couple of others here too. If we click and we choose fade in, we'll see this is basically just a fade in. So over the course of a few seconds, it fades the sound in gradually in both channels. Now, what's nice is even when you choose one of these presets, you can work with it a little bit. So you may say, all right, well, this is a pretty long fade in. Let's see what it sounds like, though. So that's pretty long. That's a couple of seconds, maybe a little bit more of a lag than we want. So what we can do here is if we click the stop button, we can adjust this by grabbing these handles, and we can reduce the duration of the fade just like this. So I'm going to pull this a little bit to the left, and you'll see some much steeper fade in. So it should fade in a lot faster. If I click the play button again, we'll see it's basically a second and a half, and the sound is at full volume right away. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you look in the lower right-hand corner here, we've got a couple of different buttons. We already realized these are the zoom in and zoom out buttons, but we have a button here that looks like a clock face and one that looks like a film strip. This basically allows us to select between two different representations of time, as shown here on this time ruler. So right here where we see 10, 20, and so on, this is actually seconds. And that's because we have the seconds option clicked in here. So we know how long our sound is in seconds. But what if we're trying to sync up our sound with an animation? We know that animation, for instance, is 40 frames long. It may be more beneficial for us to be able to see how long the sound is in frames so we can trim it accordingly to match the animation. So for that, let's go ahead and click this. And you'll see what that shows is the length of the sound in frames. So this is actually a fairly long sound. It shows us this is 500 frames long. But what's good about knowing that is that we can now adjust that sound to match other things going on in the movie, and we don't have to do conversion in our head between frames and seconds. So as we've seen here, again, our edit envelope dialog box is going to be our best friend when working with imported sounds on the timeline.